Hi everyone, welcome to the Stay Hungry podcast. It's Joel at Codebreak and I've got a very special guest for you. Wait for this one. Mike, welcome to the Stay Hungry podcast.
Joel, how are you? Thanks for having me.
I'm good. I'm keen to tell people who you are. So you're one of our very few American guests. And let us know who you are.
Sure. So Mike Grinberg.
Hang on, Mike. Hang on. We've got a real problem, and I've just spotted it, and I didn't spot it before the podcast started.
I was wondering when this was going to happen.
So, you're not going to expect this, but I think you're wearing a Liverpool shirt.
Oh, I'm totally going to expect it, and yes, I am.
I'm a Shrewsbury Town fan. Now, if you know this, I'll be impressed. But basically, you cheated us out of the cup last season, and we're a tiny minnow football team, and you use VAR to cheat us out of the FA Cup. So, I'm not sure how I feel anymore.
I do remember that.
Yeah, well, I was there. And it was horrible.
I apologize. That was all my fault. I was definitely wearing my jersey that day, and I think that did it.
Well, we've cleared that up. I'm glad you're sorry. Sorry, Mike. Tell us who you are.
Oh no, that's I've also got a Liverpool mug too.
I can't cope.
I think this interview might be over right before we even start.
I mean, I've heard Everton are a good team. That's
Well, they are this year.
Well, yeah, that's true. Although a bit dirty based on the weekend. So
yeah. We'll see how it all plays out. Anyhow.
So
yeah. So my wife and I run a B2B marketing agency called Proofpoint. We're based out of Minneapolis, but we're fully remote. So our team is kind of a boutique team. 5 people plus a few contractors, but we're all over the U.S.
Okay. Cool.
We focus mostly on tech and manufacturing companies.
Yeah.
So that's what we do.
Yeah. So you've been kind enough to join us today to talk about software as a service marketing, and basically, yeah, I'm interested to hear kind of what your experiences have been this year. I'm sure that's a relatively buoyant market at the moment, considering everything that's going on. But also, yeah, what kind of things we could apply to other businesses too from that?
Sure. I mean, in terms of the clients that we work with, it's kind of run the gamut. We've had some clients who are very sales-focused organizations that have decided that the only way they are going to get any more business this year is by knocking on doors and doing, really focusing on sales. So they've cut marketing pretty much completely. We've had clients who are on the flip side seeing more of a boom because everybody's virtual and digital, and that's a focus. So they are on the flip side investing more. And then we've had some that are kind of in that middle ground where they've been hit, but not too hard, and they're just figuring out how to be, do more with less, if you will.
Yeah, I hear you.
So that's we've seen it all at this point. I think. I mean, our business we get hit initially fairly hard. It's things have been recovering at this point. Clients are there's a lot more conversations happening at this point too. I mean, people seemingly are. I think this is across the board. It's not just tech, but finally people are like, okay, we can't be reactive anymore. I guess we do have to plan for 2021. I'm guessing you guys are seeing the same kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly the same scenario. I don't want to go through April and May ever again. But now things are quite lively. The conversations are a bit different. I think people are starting to see marketing more as a way of protecting their business than just a reactive thing that you do to try and get some sales through the door. So,
yeah. I'm curious. I'm gonna start asking you questions. Have you guys seen where clients have pulled back and then realized, oh boy, maybe bad idea kind of thing, and now they're back?
Yeah, a couple came back because they quickly realised it was a bad idea. Some didn't come back, and some kind of doubled down on their marketing. So we genuinely had conversations with some people where they said everybody's going to stop marketing, so we're going to do twice as much.
Yep.
And I'm very grateful to those people at the moment, but also I think it was a smart move. We did the same as a business. We handle most of our own marketing, but we actually decided to invest more in our marketing when everything got bad.
Yep. Yeah, we did the exact same thing. I mean, we sort of took it as an opportunity to. We actually we did a rebrand in April. We did so we got a new site launched and all that fun stuff. Our podcast, which isn't technically related to our agency, we launched in August, and we were working on getting that going. We're launching the second podcast we're launching is definitely marketing focused.
Okay.
So it's a very agency related. So we're investing in that. So and we're pushing our clients as much as possible to do the same, which is stop being reactive, stop waiting, and it's
be proactive
times, if you will, because content consumption, everything has definitely shifted in terms of how people are consuming their content and where they're getting it and how they're getting recommendations and all that fun stuff. I think it's especially changed in B2B. I feel like B2C that changed a long time ago, but on the B2B side, it's definitely been a pretty major shift over the last 6 months. So we're staying in front of it, and we're trying to get our clients that maybe have been reluctant to change their minds and try to stay in front of it too.
Yeah,
or at least not fall behind.
Yeah, I think the one thing 2020's shown everybody is how quickly they can fall behind, and that, I mean, we have less conversations now, but I would say they're more lucrative conversations for both parties. You get to the point a lot quicker, so it's.
Exactly. Yeah, I think because budgets are tighter, and because if they're talking to you, they clearly have a purpose. Versus there's not too many tire kickers. It seems like.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Either you're in or you're out. You're going to do business with somebody, right? And it's just whatever it is, choosing that right partner.
So talk to me for some of our British listeners. I'm not sure they'll know what software as a service is. It is a term we use, but
sure.
A lot of our listeners are business owners that might not know what it is. So talk to me about that.
Sure. So I mean, I'm guessing just about everybody knows what it is. They might just because they use it. Mm-hmm. I would assume it pretty much any piece of software, anything that you pay a subscription for, that is software as a service. You don't own it. You don't, it doesn't download to your computer. Mm-hmm. It's just in the cloud, and you pay a subscription for it. So there's consumer versions of that. There's obviously B2B versions of that. So CRM software like Salesforce.
Yeah.
That's software as a service example that probably everybody at least knows of.
Yeah, Salesforce, Xero, QuickBooks. They'll be the ones the business owners know. I guess our industry, Hootsuite, Buffer, that kind of thing. Fair enough, what's different about marketing software as a service to marketing anything else?
I think one of the big differences you have different metrics, right? Mm-hmm. Because you're not 90+% of the time, you're not just looking at initial contract value, you're looking at lifetime value.
Okay.
Right. So that's a big difference. And then also you have to really, really have a good handle on churn and a good handle on customer acquisition payback period and kind of the length of that sales cycle, because otherwise you can very quickly lose a lot of money in your marketing.
Yeah,
and not be able to pay it back fast enough, because then the cost starts, depending on the size of the business in the startup world, especially if it's bootstrapped, you very quickly will start running out of, eating into your cash flow if you don't.
Yeah, sure. I think in our experience, people are always surprised how much customer acquisition costs, and then surprised how long it takes to pay that back. And
Yep. I think and that's where I think a lot of people go wrong, because sometimes they'll go, depending on what world they've come from in the past, they focus on some of these leading indicators like cost per lead and, all that fun stuff. And then, yeah, great. You got say $50 cost per lead, $10 product. But if you need, 1,000 leads to sell one, now you got a big problem all of a sudden.
Yeah.
And if it takes you, if your sales cycle to sell one of those is 4 months and you're bootstrapped, next thing you know, you're running out of cash faster than you can sign customers.
Yeah. I mean, we've worked with a few businesses like this, particularly one I remember around 5 years ago. They did table bookings for restaurants, and at the time there was a few players, but nobody had really grasped the market. And when we explained to them that it would take 18 months for a customer to pay for itself, it blew their minds. They hadn't prepared for that at all, because they'd come from a situation where they sold software before, and it's essentially selling a product. They just sold it out of the box each time, and it really came as a shock to them. And then that was probably about 5 years ago where we really started talking to all of our clients about lifetime value, and about how, if in any form of retained business, if you're looking at the initial payoff, you're not looking at the right thing. And obviously then we start getting into tactics about how can you make that lifetime last longer and go from there. So what do you do around that? When you're working with a client, I assume acquisition is really important, but also longevity. So
So there's, really it's a two-pronged approach, right? You've got two options. I shouldn't say options, but two avenues. One is, how do you decrease that initial cost to acquire? And along with that, how can you decrease the length of that sales cycle? Because that usually influences your cost.
Yeah.
Because the longer your sales cycle, the more budget you need to spend on getting somebody to convert. And then on the flip side, how do you get them to stay longer, like you said? So I think realistically, you got to do both. You got to sort of attack it from both ends. On the retention side, the thing that I think the vast majority of, especially mid-market SaaS companies, don't focus on, for whatever crazy reason, is the implementation and onboarding. Because a lot of the mid-market, they're self-serve, right? It's get your free trial. A lot of the time they even skip the demo, which is great. It's product-led marketing. That way it's less expensive. You don't have to pay the salespeople, et cetera, which is good, but they just don't really have an onboarding process, right?
Yeah.
They assume that just because they have a resource center and some videos on YouTube, and they'll send you, a sequence of 3 emails, like, hey, welcome, here's the 3 things you should do, that you're good. But they forget that everybody's use case is so different. Even though they might fit in different buckets, everyone's got some specific things. And unless they have a good onboarding process, that it's even as simple things as, like, if you can avoid having somebody have to reach out through chat or customer service to get a simple question answered, that alone can have a major impact.
Yeah.
Right? So I think it's really focusing on that onboarding process. Sometimes maybe, and again, it doesn't mean that it can't be automated. It can be. I just think it needs to be more than sort of the usual, if you build it, they will come kind of thing.
Yeah.
People just assume, oh, we have a great product, we have a great resource center, we're good to go. And then they get surprised where you only get somebody to stick around for 9 months or whatever, right?
Yeah,
because
yeah.
Like, okay. And the other thing is, I would say, and it was related to that, is I'm sure you guys buy software for your agency, right? It's one of the biggest issues is there's so much out there. What usually happens is, again, especially on that mid-market side, enterprise is much different, I would say. But on that mid-market where you're buying, a $50 to $100, $200 a month piece of software, you are generally buying it for 1 or 2 very specific features or use cases, right? You're like, hey, I really need to do this one thing. What's the thing that does it? Oh, here's my 3 options. This seems good for whatever reason. I'm going to buy it. You almost don't even look at the other 55 things it can do. But then once that problem has been solved, say 2-3 months down the line, 6 months down the line, you're going, my God, I'm paying $300 for this one problem. You forget how big of a problem it was in the kind of when you initially bought it. And then you're going, oh, is this really a good investment? Especially, right now, like when budgets are tight and SaaS is always in danger because, it's cancer subscription.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So you forget how big of a problem it was. And then you go, oh, well, do I really need to pay this $100 or $300, whatever it is per month? Because you haven't leveraged it to its full potential. And again, that gets back to that implementation and that ongoing education of, they'll send you, oh, here's this new feature, but that's not enough, right? Because 99% of the time you don't look at those emails. You don't, as a customer, you don't pay attention to it, and it doesn't apply to you at that time.
Yeah.
So it's, figuring out ways to get people into user groups and get people into communities. It's got to be more engagement rather than just feeding them information when you think it's right versus when it's right for them.
Yeah,
I think probably one of the biggest ones.
I think we're seeing that with a lot of marketplaces now, where you kind of almost you want to introduce clients to clients that are similar to them and say, these people have found this really useful, but they've also found this, and this really useful. And that introduction's worth way more than the service itself.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, and I mean, that's sort of I would say that also goes all the way up front into shortening and narrowing the sales cycle, if you will. It's getting people comfortable with and trusting your value proposition.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's where you've seen the kind of proliferation of, there's entire businesses starting up around this too. The proliferation of video testimonials and video case studies and things like that, right? Because nobody wants to read your case study, right? And mostly it's because most of them are ridiculously boring. But even if you write a good, we'll call it a case story rather than a case study, it still tends to be like a little boring, right?
Versus
you get somebody in front of a 5-minute video that really talks about a very specific use case which relates to you. Like, oh wow, yeah, this is a real person that from a real company that did this real thing. Cool.
Yeah.
It just makes a big difference.
So how much of that comes back to the way you market that business? I suppose if you drive a certain type of person, you would know what kind of material to serve them. I don't know if I've come up with a question there. I just made a
no,
statement.
I get what you're saying. I mean, there's, I suppose, a couple ways to look at it, right? There's, well, to start all the way at the beginning, this is what we focus on, is you really have to understand the customer as deeply as you can. It's not just, yes, you need to know their pain points, of course, right? Like how can you even build a product without knowing what pain points you're solving? But it's understanding kind of not just the pain points that the organization has, but that the individual stakeholders have.
Yeah.
Right. So, for example, if you are, we go with a real client example. If you're dealing with ERP software, enterprise resource planning, right? There's going to be a lot of different stakeholders. If you're selling a manufacturing company, for example, you need to understand what are the operations people dealing with, right? What puts their job on the line? What are the finance? Like, what does the CFO care about? It's not just price, right? He's dealing with this is an operational piece of software. What is he using it for? What problems does he have if this doesn't work? Like that kind of stuff. And then figure out a way to emotionally tie into those things, right?
Yeah.
Because I think that's the way that that's the thing that people forget is, it's B2B. There's a committee, usually at least a couple people most of the time making the decision, but there's still people.
Yeah.
They're going to justify their decision logically, but they're going to have an emotional connection somehow. Now, a lot of that gets into more sales, I think, but even on the marketing side, like they'll connect with, like that video testimonial. It's like, oh wow, this person, they look like me.
Yeah.
Right. Or they talk like me, or whatever it is. They can start having that connection. Oh, these people understand me because they understood this person based on how they see the interaction on the video testimonial going, for example. So things like that. I think that's probably one of the most important things.
Yeah, hugely. And I think Oh, we see so many terrible testimonials, really bad testimonials, and we'll bring a new client on board, and they'll say, "Oh, we've got loads of testimonials," and I have to politely tell them, "None of these are usable." And what do you mean? I was like,
it can't be a commercial anymore. I think that it used to be great to be able to do something that was very highly produced and really literally look like a commercial. I don't think people just don't buy that anymore.
no,
It has to be. You have to show you having a real conversation with them.
yeah, real conversation,
how it worked.
Exactly, the real journey that they went on, and I think it's got to be warts and all. You need to show the stumbling blocks along the way. They want to know it's real, and not.
Yeah, it can't just be all sunshine and roses. I think that's where, in full trend, we've been it's all one for the agency. It's one of our projects is to actually get video testimonials and to rewrite our case studies, because it's, you kind of have the standard format: problem, solution, results. And it's like, okay, that's great, but that's not real, right? It wasn't that simple.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't, like you said, without those stumbling blocks, and it wasn't all sunshine and roses. There were problems that had to be solved in the middle there as you were working together, or as the software was being implemented, or whatever.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hi there, it's Andy at Codebreak. Thanks for listening to the Stay Hungry podcast. It's business owners like you that keep the wheels of the world turning. Did you know that Codebreak offers a marketing consultancy service? Visit codebreak.co.uk today and book your discovery call with me or Joel, and let's skyrocket your business together. We can't wait to hear about your goals.
He's good at those ads. He's really good at those ads. So, let's go off track. I want to know how I've ended up talking to a Liverpool fan from Minneapolis. So,
well, so we have a gal that helps us with podcast outreach, and she reaches out to, podcasts like yours where they're relevant to what we do, and that's how we got connected.
Okay.
And as far as me being a Liverpool fan, I did a study abroad when I was in college. We ended up not in Liverpool actually, but it was during the 2006 Champions League where they lost to AC Milan.
Okay.
And that's where I ended up fully becoming a Liverpool fan. Been one ever since.
Cool. Fair enough.
I mean, I played soccer in high school, and so I'm originally from Eastern Europe, so I grew up playing soccer.
Okay. Oh, whereabouts are you from?
From Moldova.
Oh, okay, cool. Yeah, bit of a soccer country.
We moved to the States. I was 8 years old back in '92, so curtain fell and all that fun stuff.
Yeah, sure. So, who's your favourite player?
That's a good question. I mean, right now, as Liverpool is concerned, it'd be Mane.
Yeah, I think that's a safe bet. He does all the work, and Mo Salah gets all the plaudits.
Exactly.
So
I always kind of go for the workhorse. That's just
Mane is marketing,
sports and all that.
Mane is marketing, and Salah is sales.
There you go.
So I've pulled it back. Cool.
That's a good analogy.
Well, yeah, a lot of my family support Liverpool, which probably.
Does that hurt?
Explains my animosity. Yeah, exactly.
So I have my brother-in-law is from Manchester, and he's a Buddy fan.
Okay.
So way down in the league. So I know a little bit about all the not the league.
They don't exist anymore.
So apparently they just got resurrected, as it's.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, that's true. They were in the same league as Shrewsbury until last year when they buried themselves as such. Mm-hmm. But I used to live next to Bury. That's where I'm from, sort of. So funny. It's a small world. So
yes, it is.
Talk to me about how you as a business acquire clients, how you can help businesses with their software as a service, and kind of why they should use you, really.
Sure. It's as far as how we acquire clients, we get a lot of referrals.
Mm-hmm.
Shouldn't say a lot, but enough of referrals. And then we're actually, interestingly, right now we're working with a sales coach and whatnot. So we're doing a little bit more outbound than we used to.
Yeah.
And we were really active on LinkedIn. I think that's a big area where I think companies of all industries need to be investing more. At least right now, it's still I don't know if you can still call it a blue ocean, but there's still a lot of opportunity.
Yeah, it's still a bit like
reach.
A bit like the Wild West still on LinkedIn. There's less rules, so you can kind of reach a lot more people.
Yep.
So.
Yep. And then we have our one podcast and we're starting another one. So I think that's an avenue. There's a lot of podcasts are kind of exploding. A podcast right now is sort of how the blog was 10 years ago.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Everybody wants one. Doesn't mean everybody necessarily should have one, but if you can do it right and invest the right amount of energy into it, I think it definitely can be a way to have the right conversations.
Yeah, don't expect to do one and see some traction. I mean, I think this is episode 115. So
yeah.
So mixing business with pleasure. That's the podcast you've already got.
That's right.
Live, and I think, as far as I remember, it's a podcast for husband and wife business teams.
Mostly it's husband and wives. It just so happens. They can be. We've talked to engaged couples. We've talked to non-married couples.
Okay.
The main thing is they do run a business together, and they've done it successfully.
So my business partner Andy, him and his wife are business partners. So I was interested to ask you about the Mixing Business with Pleasure podcast. How's it going? What kind of guests have you had? What kind of conversations do you get into? Have you had any arguments?
It's going very well. We started it as a selfish passion project.
Yeah.
Because it's interesting. If you're not a husband and wife business owner, you don't really get it.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And that's part of and that's why it's isolating to a certain extent. You wouldn't think so. You're like, oh, well, you have a built-in friend and business partner, right? It should be easy, which there's definitely a lot of benefits to it. Right. One of the jokes I always throw out there is, a lot of people go, oh, there's no way I could work with my spouse. It's like, well, if you can't, business partnerships are built on trust. And if you can't trust your spouse, you get a whole different set of issues.
Mm-hmm.
But on the flip side, if you have an issue, who are you going to talk to?
Yeah.
Right. So that's why we started it. It's like we wanted to be around and learn from other people that are doing what we're doing. And what we found is there's a huge need for it because just about everybody we talk to feels just like us. Like, well, we're isolated. If I've got a problem, I can't go and talk to even my best friend about the problem I'm having with my wife and my business, or my husband and my business. If I'm going to talk to anybody, it's going to be another husband and wife business owner couple. Maybe we'll talk about it together, kind of thing.
Yeah.
But most people don't because they don't realize there's, in the U.S., I think it's like last we looked, there's like 3 million businesses. Now, most of them are small businesses, but still.
Yeah.
In terms of the types of guests, we're on the gamut, really. Like, we don't really discriminate. We've had startup businesses that are kind of just starting out and, having a pretty good go at it. We've had a little while ago, we interviewed a local flooring company. They do like commercial and residential flooring. They've been around for like 20 plus years, I think. Right. So we try to get different perspectives, different types of businesses. And we really focus on talking about both the relationship side as well as the business side, hence mixing business with pleasure. Because really it's about how do you do both of those?
Sure.
Right? Because inherently business is going to bring about challenges in your relationship and vice versa. So how do you handle that? And the goal is to provide, actionable tips and advice and good stories to people that are listening.
Sure. So I have a question around that. If you work together all day, how do you separate work from home? Where's the line where you want to sit and watch Netflix and share a glass of wine and you're still buzzing about the client that you spoke to earlier in the day? How do you cut that out?
There's two answers to that question. The one is you don't, and the other one is you have to agree. And for us, I can only tell you like how we do it, for example, but we sort of, it's usually spur of the moment. Like sometimes we just get to some point of the day or a time in the week or whatever it is, and we go, you know what, there's no more work talk. And usually it's funny because usually it's not both of us, it's one of us that comes up with it. It's like, all right, you know what, I'm just done, can't do it anymore. No more work talk until tomorrow, kind of thing, or until later, or whatever it is. Or Gabby, my wife, vice versa, right?
Yeah.
So on the flip side, honestly, when you're a business owner, at least for me, it almost never shuts off. It's very rare, just because I'm just the type of person that's always thinking about something. It could be a client, it could be the next thing we're going to do as a business, it could be a freaking new business idea completely, which that's what drives my wife crazy. She's like, we're working on these other two things. Don't stop bringing me new stuff.
Yeah.
So I got notebooks full of half-baked ideas, I guess, at this point.
Yeah, no, I'm very much the same. I mean, I'm not in business with my wife, but I've just taken to writing a journal so that when my mind is running away with itself, rather than sort of putting it all on her, I go and write it down and put it to one side. And at the moment, that's working.
I need to do more of that, but yeah.
That's cool. So if I was to be launching a SaaS business tomorrow, and I think I've come up with the latest thing that people need for, I don't know, organising their lives. There's one. What's my first step?
Are you bootstrapped or do you have funding?
Well, if it's me, let's say I've got no funding, so I'm just going for it.
I think it's if your product is ready and it's kind of out of beta, if you will. Really, you have to look at you have to find the right communities, because if you're bootstrapped, you're not going to have tons of ad dollars to spend.
Sure.
Usually, it depends, but for the most part, people you generally don't. So you have to find the right community. So things like Product Hunt are a good idea. Joining there's tons of micro communities. If you're selling a marketing product, like a MarTech product, I'm part of a community called Rev Genius. There's others like it, right? So get in there and get in front of the right types of people. It's relationship building rather than traditional marketing.
Yeah.
I think it's a lot of that. I think if it makes sense, a podcast, we've been recommending that a lot to clients, but it's, there's two things. One is, if you have a little bit of budget, you can outsource it fairly inexpensively. The entirety of the production. That's what we're doing with our new one, just because we produce our current one ourselves, and it just takes a ton of time, which I'm sure you know. But there's some fairly inexpensive places you can outsource to, and then you do have to be able to commit enough time to it, right? So it's okay, I'm going to interview once a week, or once every day, or once every 2 weeks, whatever it is. And I'm going to really focus on getting the right types of, I'm going to do the outreach, right? Like, I think that's the one thing that a lot of people forget is you have to do the outreach. Otherwise people aren't going to come.
Yeah. I mean, to be completely open and honest, we have Facebook ads, we have Google ads, we have retargeting ads, we have a social media campaign behind our podcast. We record 2 episodes a week. We try to reduce the edit as much as we can because we use a Rodecaster Pro deck so that we can kind of get as much done as we can there and then. But you're talking maybe 15, 20 hours time invested every week between the team. And I think that surprises people.
It does. It surprised us when we got into it, because we were like, oh yeah, we'll record an interview, we'll do some outreach. I mean, how bad can it, and I've got some background in video and audio editing from my college days, so I wasn't like completely novice into it.
Yeah.
But even then, we actually do post-production. We kind of do it have the basic tech up front, but we do the post.
Yeah.
You gotta who has uhs and ums every 5 seconds, and you've got somebody that's a crappy mic, and now all of a sudden you're spending 4 hours or 5 hours editing just for the basic audio quality.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Anyway, back to your original question. So yeah, I think a podcast is a very legitimate thing to look at even early on, I think. But you have to consider do you have the right resources for it? That could be either, that's both budget and time.
Yes.
And other than that, I think from a more traditional marketing perspective, I think it's LinkedIn is the other big one. Again, I'm just focusing on all pretty much, if you're bootstrapped, it's how can I find sort of that disproportionate amount of eyeballs to competition, right? So I look at LinkedIn. If depending on the type of product, I'd look at Reddit. But really, I would say community focused. The podcast is a community. The micro communities are a community. Reddit is a community. Heck, LinkedIn is technically a community.
Yeah.
I think that is where I would focus my time if you're bootstrapped.
So
I would not really spend a ton on ads, maybe retargeting.
Yeah.
Maybe you would do retargeting. But to start with, I don't think I would invest a ton in, if any, on prospecting, like paid search or Facebook ads or whatever. Not right away, at least.
No, I agree. I think there'd be retargeting, and there would be a little bit of work around abandoned cart, I think, to make sure.
Yeah. If you have like self-serve thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Sure. Just to make sure you're mopping up the people that meant to buy but didn't. But so obviously we talked a lot about bootstrap businesses. If you're not bootstrapped, if you are funded, what kind of figures are we talking about? It entirely depends on what the software is, I understand, but I often sit down with a client and say, this is how much ad budget I think you need to start with. And they are not prepared for the number that I say. What's your experience on that?
I think we've been in the agency side for a while as well, and it's that very often that is the case. But what I found is we're working on fixing that. A lot of the time, that's a problem in our sales process more than is that they don't understand anything. We assume that they don't get it, and what we found is asking simple questions sometime in the sales process, like early on, like, what do you think something like this would cost? You don't give them a price, just ask them. And sometimes I've had it where they're like, it's this. I'm like, that's twice as much as what we would actually charge for it. All right. Like we wouldn't actually, we'd still charge them what we would charge them, but it's like, okay, you guys get it. Or on the flip side, it's like, I think it's gonna be $5. Okay.
Yeah,
and then,
sure.
Then what we're using a sales coach, and it's something that he's been helping us with is like asking the right questions. If somebody says that, it's like, how did you come up with that? Where did you get that information?
Yeah.
Right. Because then you find out, we worked with this other vendor and that's what they charge us. How did that go? It was awful. All right. Now we're getting somewhere. Right. So I think a lot of it it's a sales process thing. I think the media budget, that's a little bit different. Like if you're going to, I do think depending on whether they've been in the space before, sometimes you'll get this thing where they don't realize, for example, like how expensive paid search is in that specific industry, or how expensive, Facebook traffic is for that audience, or et cetera, et cetera. Or the big one that I think nobody recognizes is how ridiculously expensive LinkedIn ads are. Because everyone's like, LinkedIn, that's my go-to. Like we have to do LinkedIn ads. And my first question is, what's your initial contract value? $10,000. Don't do it. Not enough. The economics just don't work when you're paying $15-$20 a click. There's no way you're going to make that work.
Yeah.
Most of the time, like it's got to be higher than that.
Yeah, and I think that's the shock people have with us is we'll say something, say like £8,000-9,000 initial contract value. Oh yeah, we can't make that work. They're like, you can't make that work. That's a lot of money. Oh yeah, LinkedIn isn't geared for that. LinkedIn ads are geared for big companies, and
they're geared for enterprise, really.
Yeah, And then we talk about conversion costs on Facebook ads, and I think you touched on it before about how many leads you need in order to get a customer. And people are very shocked that a lead can cost anything between, in your terms, $6 and $60, but that they might need 100 leads to get a purchase, and that blows their mind.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's where you start getting, like, we get into this conversation of, and I think that's in general, it's a problem. Definitely in SaaS marketing for sure, where everyone's on this lead gen hamster wheel, right? Of, okay, well, we've got our model figured out. We need 10,000 leads to convert 10 customers. It's like, well, what if we can figure out a way to where you only need 500 leads to convert 10 customers? Wouldn't that be better?
Yeah.
Right. And they're, because they everyone's just, taught the HubSpot play from 2010, and everyone runs it still. It's like
the HubSpot funnel play.
Yeah. But that's what most people do. I mean, heck, I literally just had a conversation with a prospect, when I'm talking to a VP level person, like, well, I want to do all these things, but I'm judged at MQLs. Facepalm, like, we got to figure that out, because that's the problem.
Yeah.
You're not going to be able to do these other things that are going to significantly improve your inbound and the number one, it'll improve the number of leads you get organically. Number two, it'll improve the quality of the leads you get.
Mm-hmm.
Like, running a podcast, how do you attribute that? You can't, right? Like, you can't not really. You can't really attribute depending on the size of your business, right? Like, for us, I'm guessing we can, because, if you guys will get, I don't know, maybe a couple clients from your podcast a month or a quarter or whatever, that's easy to attribute. But if you're and that's for people you talk with, but what you don't know necessarily is how many people have listened to your show and then come and talk to you.
Yeah.
Most of the time they won't tell you.
And that's a huge thing we're talking to clients about a lot now. Obviously, I think you mentioned relationship marketing, but our podcast isn't for acquisition. Our podcast is for warm up. And most people, when they approach us, they've probably heard our podcast. They've seen me on a couple of videos. They've maybe had something in the mail from me. They've certainly had a couple of emails from me. And they'll have been reserved, I don't know, Google remarketing, Facebook retargeting, that kind of thing. And it's all part of the puzzle. And very often people will approach us and say, we want you to run some Facebook ads for us. Well, why? Because we want to sell more of this. Well, that's not how the world works anymore. And
yep.
And that they don't get it, because maybe 7 or 8 years ago they could just plow money at something and people would buy.
Yep. Well, I think that's the problem that people have with paid search. I mean, so I grew up with search, right? I mean, I started out doing paid search, organic, and even organic has definitely evolved significantly since then. But on the paid search side, like, everyone's still like we still get inbound stuff that's like, we want to run a paid search campaign. Why? Well, we want to diversify our inbound stuff. It's like, okay, well, paid search is a viable channel, but that alone won't really get you what you need, not at the volume that you need, and not at the budget that you have.
Yeah. I've had that very example. Very recently, we were doing a lot of social media based work with a client, and a lot of social media advertising, and they said, we just to compare, we've gone and done some paid search to see what happens, and we're getting the same clicks as you, but the cost per conversion is 3 times more. And I said, well, if you'd have asked me before you did it, I could have told you that was going to be the case. Well, how do you know? I said, well, because everything we're doing is about relationship, and everything you're doing there entirely relies on somebody searching for you in the first place. And that's a really difficult conversation for people who have come from a Google search or a Yale.com type environment to suddenly they're being told they need to make friends with everybody.
Yep. Well, I think that's the thing is especially on the B2B side. And again, I think it depends where. Like people who've been on the enterprise marketing side, like the Oracles and the Microsofts and whatever the world, they know this, and they have heaps of data that they can use to personalize and all that stuff. I think it's that some of these mid-market companies that have been around for a while, the new ones I think get it more because they've seen they're coming up at the sort of like millennials, whatever, or Gen Z, whatever. They've come up with social media and tech, like they don't know it any other way. I think it's the same thing with more newer startups and younger founders where this is the only thing they know. It's some of these companies that have been around for a little longer and they've seen the like I called it the HubSpot play.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, that's what I got to do. No, because it's about trust, right? At the end of the day, they need to trust you. If we're talking sales and to a certain extent marketing and sales, they got to trust you as a person. They got to trust you as a professional. They got to trust you as the organization. If you can get all those three, you should be pretty good. But that takes time, and that you're building a relationship. It could be a digital relationship, but it's still a relationship.
Yeah, you've got to expose them to so much. Yeah, I find that the amount that I'm in front of the camera scares me. I'm constantly in front of a camera in one way or another, whether it's for candid photography in the office, whether it's I record 2 videos a week, I record 2 podcasts a week. But it's all about that trust element, and also, in fairness, about putting off the people that wouldn't work with us anyway. So we're kind of filtering out the people that it's not going to work for all the time, and that's a really difficult one for us when we work with mid-market companies, to say to them, it's just as important that we get rid of the people that would be bad customers as it is of attracting the good customers.
Well, that gets back to understanding your customer in the first place, right? I mean, that's our tagline, if you will. It's understand your customer, drive profitable growth. You can't do the latter unless you really understand who your ideal customer is. I think people usually stop too high up in that journey, which is like, oh, well, I target CIOs and CTOs and $50 million plus company in the manufacturing space. Okay, that's a good start. That's not enough, right? Like, gotta get deeper. What do they care about? What are their problems? Where do they live? Who else is involved? Who are the detractors? Like, all of those things you need to understand. And are there manufacturing? Great. Are there sub niches in manufacturing that are more profitable versus less profitable? Why? Right? Is there a more specific use case they care? Like, all of those things you have to understand, because without it, your net's too wide and your marketing is just going to fall flat because you're not building that relationship. You sound like you're talking to everybody rather than to them, even if you're just talking to one industry.
Yeah, we call it throwing too much crap at the wall and seeing what sticks.
Yep.
Which always draws a laugh in an initial client meeting, but it's pretty much every business, 9 out of 10 businesses that we speak to, that's what they've done before they speak to us. And here's what it is. So I guess what if a business was to approach you today about SaaS marketing, what would be the one thing they could take from this podcast? Tough question.
At a very high level, it's build relationships.
Build relationships.
I think that's what it's about. And I think, again, that sounds, I just want to clarify that it can sound daunting, but I think, building relationships doesn't mean you have to talk to them in person. I mean, at some point you're probably going to have to. It depends on what type of sale you have, but you can build a relationship virtually and digitally without actually ever meeting them in person, and still having them feel like they know you, right?
Yeah.
That could be the personal brands of the people at the company. That could be the brand of the company itself in terms of kind of how you project it and what the value is, et cetera. But I think I would say that's the most important thing.
Cool. Mike, you've been awesome. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast and sharing your knowledge.
Thanks for having me. This is fun. I can talk about this stuff for hours. So
nice one. Thank you very much.